I'm the captain, and I'm going to start this documentary by making a few claims that I will back up with undeniable evidence. I've located lands that have been hidden from us. Multiple massive landmasses that are beyond our known world. Fully chartered, and I have the means to set sail in multiple vessels that I own once I've secured crews, including a second captain. Let me show you what no one else is capable of. If watched in full context, what I've got to show you will blow your mind repeatedly, including that the hidden lands that surround us are fully built out with old world architecture and infrastructure, just like how we see all around us. That the flat earth model is purposely incorrect and designed to deceive you. There is no ice wall, and I'll prove it. Everything you think you know about Tartaria is wrong. I figured out the entirety of the last great reset of humanity worldwide, and it only ended in 1860. Undeniably proven and fully explaining the mud flood aftermath. Australia and its natives are not what you think they are, and that our entire recent timeline has been fabricated. After decades of personal research down the rabbit hole, dividing truth from sheer conspiracy and fantasy, following a spiritual path that's been guided, I've took all the relevant individual research subjects and I've pieced them together. Not just put subjects side by side, but fuse them together. One topic only makes sense and fuse with the previous, all in context. But only by doing this can any of us see the bigger picture, knowledge combined. If a picture says 1,000 words, and our eyes can see 1,000 lies, see it to believe it. This documentary was not created to attempt to wake the soulless non-player characters that surround us. They're not programmed to acknowledge or question the world around them. This documentary is for you, the small amount of truly enlightened human beings in this world. Not to go all Morpheus on you, but you've felt it all of your life. Always been the odd one out. You've always known that something just isn't quite right about this place. You've followed your senses, your intuition, your heart, your common sense, and what your eyes tell you. I'll never tell anybody what to do or think. I can only guide you. But if you are truly enlightened, you're more than capable to think for yourself and resonate with the truth. And for that reason, as I move as quickly as I can from topic to topic to get my main points across and show you your reality, I'll show sufficient evidence to every single claim that I make along the way. Anyways, I've come here to chew bubblegum and kick ass, and I'm all out of bubblegum, so it's time to get your sunglasses on. I decided to severely shorten down this section of my already long and information-packed documentary, wasting 25 minutes of enlightened people's time adding unnecessary proofs of the shape of the lands beneath our feet and the heavens above. This is entry-level knowledge, the basics, but essential knowledge to comprehend your reality. If at this point you still think that Neil disgraced Tyson is an intelligent man and we live on a globe spinning at 1,000 miles per hour while spinning around the sun at 67,000 miles per hour, while the sun's spinning around the Milky Way at 447,000 miles per hour, while the Milky Way's spinning around some other pseudoscience that they can't even explain. A spinny globe with magical gravity, holding down bendy oceans while my pint of crack and rum goes unaffected. Never mind Great Lakes and Olympic-sized swimming pools. With fake CGI cartoon space, cartoon planets, cartoon stars, cartoon space stations, astronauts in space, cartoon satellites with cringy realities, Elon's shit cartoon car, Freemasons land on a plasma moon with tinfoil spaceships, upside down umbrellas, and embarrassing clip art cartoons from the moon. If at this point during the awakening you still believe all that, either go see the man that's enlightened the most souls in this world, Mr. Eric DeBay, and come back to this presentation once you've got your big boy pants on, or go back to watching funny cat videos, jacking off to midget porn, and discussing 9/11 for another couple of decades. I don't care either way. When it comes to old world architecture, it's evident that these amazing structures were not built by our recent ancestors in our fabricated timeline. Once I'd put together the past world resets, which I'll explain in detail, I was able to distinguish 4 main different timelines of architecture, all separated by one or more worldwide catastrophic events of destruction. I generalise these 4 timelines as the ancient architecture, massive structures made from solid stone, oversized in every way, some severely weathered, eroded, melted, and even destroyed beyond recognition. The second timeline structures, which I'll refer to as old world architecture, and that's practically everything the AI narrative wrote being founded in the 1900s, during a time frame that I'll prove only had 10% or less of the previous world's population, the events that buried this world in mud. The third timeline of architecture won't make any sense until I've explained the past reset, but this is everything that was built by the civilization pre-reset. And again, I will prove to you that the previous timeline civilization did not build the ancient or old world architecture, which are all these rounded type castles, battlement shapes along the tops, mostly battle damaged or falling apart. But don't get these mixed up with the more impressive old world castle type structures, or the ancient star forts that are all over the world. The less skilled pre-reset timeline peoples made much more primitive timber-framed houses, higgledy-piggledy wonky walls, solid, thick-walled, highly thermal, thatched roofs. Like their predecessors, they also built a lot of red brick houses. Not quite as impressive as the old world's timelines buildings, but still very nice solidly built structures. And all of the terrace type houses. And the fourth timeline of architecture is our timeline, which is everything from about 1860 onwards. Ugly, boring, lifeless box skyscrapers, box apartments, box houses, made with temporary, flimsy, cheap materials or steel and glass. Proving that the mainstream narrative has been falsified is easy in supposedly new countries like America, Canada and Australia. Countries that shouldn't have ancient and old world buildings, but they all do. This channel is called My Lunch Break. This channel is dedicated to proving architectural lies and that the AI has written our narrative of history.
We are told that the USA begins in 1776. Immediately after, 16 years later, we have the stock market open up. And as we have talked about before, and this is where evolution, for whatever reason, finally starts to work for once. And the whole world supposedly becomes so intelligent and starts creating flying crafts and engines and phones, trains, TVs, and the rest of it. This is absolutely insane to believe. Then we have Australia that comes into the picture in 1901. The main issue that we have here is that we have the construction from the past civilization that is sitting here staring at us right in our faces. Buildings that we do not recreate today in 2023. Cities such as Budapest that have a coffee shop, a parliament building, and chocolate museums that look straight out of the movies. We have identified nearly 100 fire stories to this point, where buildings that are said to be built in the 1800s that clearly are from the old world are completely destroyed due to a fire, even though they're mostly made of stone, which is not flammable. This is the beginning of waking up the masses, understanding this massive historical lie, understanding that there was a previous civilization right before us that is no longer here. Where they went or what even took place that removed them from this place is what we want to know. They left all of their structures here for us to see. In my opinion, they left all of their technology, and the individuals who are supposedly so smart and evolution just hit them square in the face never created these things. Henry Ford, Thomas Edison, and on and on. Through my first 37 episodes, you will find hundreds of issues with the narrative, and we're just getting started. They were able to construct the St. Mark's Basilica in 4 years, from 828 to 832, but didn't have a light bulb? Give me a break. They built the inside with candlelight. Oh, and don't forget that it lasts forever. Unlike anything that we build today, even though this was in a time period before they even knew how to make paper. It really is incredible that once you get it, you don't go back to not getting it. You can see it all very clearly in nearly every town in the world. This past civilization had much more technology that we have not been given back yet. we have been given the car back, the train, the plane, the TV and cell phones, the light bulb and computers, internet and power tools. All major movies have been recreated. They know what we like. Refrigerators, cameras, GPS, video games, all of this in the last 300 years. In my opinion, like I've said, they have had all of this technology, and this includes AI. I'm starting to find the same narrative too many times, all over the world. I am now leaning towards an AI that most likely created all of these insane, ridiculous narratives. For every one of these buildings, the repetition of the plots and the repetition of characters gives it all away. How long has AI, or more specifically this Chat GPT stuff, really been around? Do you think this is the first time? I definitely do not.
Many of these old world buildings were built in a similar style cosmetically to the ancients, and the builders clearly had a high level of knowledge and technology to create these masterpieces. But all of these structures from this second civilization and timeline are fakes in comparison cosmetically. Other than the obvious old world structures made with red brick, when it comes to these stone looking buildings, all of these are actually built with red brick. Now there's good reason for this, and I'll get onto it later, but as you can see with any damaged old world structure, they're only lined externally and internally with either thin stone tiles made to look like solid cut stone, or they use a poured type geopolymer render. Kinda like a superior type of cement that gets harder with time. This is a perfectly good old world building being demolished. As painful as these type of videos are to watch, most show us the telltale signs of the construction methods used to build it. As you can see, this tower is made from solid stone blocks. Or is it? Once it's coming apart, you can see that it's just a red brick building with a thin layer of stone tiles. Areas like the attic space, they wouldn't have bothered lining the internal with stone, as no one would have seen it. If you hadn't realised this before, you'll notice it all the time now looking at old world buildings. And I'm not dismissing how amazing these buildings are. Their built-in technology is beyond anything in modern times. Which takes us on to the next piece of the puzzle, commonly known as Antiquitech. The ancient and old world civilizations knew how to harness an energy that's all around us called the ether, the fifth element that's been hidden from us. And the carbon-14 and iron oxide compound of the red bricks used to construct these old world buildings would act like a giant antenna and even hold charge. In 1887, the Michelson-Morley experiment attempted to prove their theory of the existence of the ether. Unfortunately, they never did due to their primitive technology of the time. Nearly 100 years later, in 1986, the US Air Force repeated their experiment and proven scientifically that the field of the ether existed. The results were published in a scientific journal called Nature in August 1986, headlined Special Relativity, Nature, Volume 322, page 590. There's no money in it for the cult with free, clean, sustainable energy for the world, so now they just deny the ether's existence. These are not religious symbols. When the cult created their religions to control and divide, they merely adopted these symbols as they were all over the buildings that were delegated as their houses of worship. You'll notice all original Antiquitech had these copper balls and antennas in the shape of the relevant symbols. This is the old world symbol for the ether. A symbol for the ether collecting ether. This is the old world symbol for Mercury. These copper balls had mercury inside. Only small amounts were needed, but with a simple magnet combined with a power source like the ether, this vortex would create its own magnetic field. Unfortunately, as the years go by, they replace this tech with their cheap wooden crosses. It's why most of these buildings have copper earthing cables running from the antenna top to the ground. And no, it's not for lightning strikes. The only time a church will have any issues is if this tech's been removed. The skilled builders of these masterpieces would have taken lightning into account before construction. Plus they were designed to harness energy and last forever. Does anybody really think it took our dumbed down society to come along and save these buildings that are probably thousands of years old? The last part of this subject, and something that will make more sense later on, are old world greenhouses. Incorporating geothermic technology, also harnessing the ether to grow supercrops unaffected by the exterior elements. Greenhouses that are big enough to feed entire cities. A similar technology has become popular in recent years called electroculture, a technology that uses electrical currents from the ether to enhance plant growth.
The film you are about to see has no characters. If you spare a little of your imagination, it is a film to describe to you the effect of cymatic frequencies on matter.
Watch the glass. And now look at the metal, the steel. Just that's incredible, isn't it?
The ancient and old world structures that we now call cathedrals and churches are not just power stations. They were like the old world hospitals and GPs, giving out healing frequencies. By applying the same techniques and semantics and testing the frequency of the church bells chiming, they create the same patterns as the magnificent rose windows you'll see all around the structure itself. The tolling bells would emit powerful vibrations and influence entire towns and their water supplies. Hence why there's tunnel systems under every cathedral, church and city worldwide. These fed the water supplies to its inhabitants around the cities. A technology taken from the ancients. The ether and the frequency of the bells would influence the molecular structure of the water. It'd be like drinking and bathing in life energy, life juice, the fountain of youth. These glass stained windows were not just for decoration, they're technology. The glass would harness the sun and moon's electro-radiation through the geometric pattern of the window, and the light on the inside takes the form of that frequency. Each frequency contains its own geometric pattern. By shining a light through a geometric pattern, it has healing on the human body and soul. It regenerates while vibrating at that same frequency. These structures also contain the most powerful sound instrument ever created, the brass organ and pipes. Breathtaking masterpieces. The organs would heal your organs. It's the reason why the ancients and old world civilizations lived longer than us and grew larger than us today. They've removed our power source, our mojo. Unfortunately, most of these original bells and organs have been removed, replaced, or never used as intended. You'll find that any of these giant bells remaining today are purposely damaged. And the narrative of their destruction is that the bells were removed worldwide and melted down to make bullets, guns, bombs and other military equipment by the cult to give to us to murder each other with. Demonic as always. In 1955, the Rockefeller Foundation, backed up by the International Organization for Standardization, changed instruments and music keytones to 440 Hz. A dissident, conscious, suppressing, negative, unharmonious, destructive, messy and harmful tone of frequency and vibration. I would recommend changing your entire music playlist from 440 Hz to the widely available 432 Hz or the 528 Hz. You will feel the benefits. We're led to believe that we're just dumb monkeys that have to be taught how to speak, but even actual monkeys are born with the ability to communicate with their own kind. But dumb humans, we have to be taught to speak, read, write, do spellings and spell casting, with the cult's word magic and their backwards pig Latin languages that we all talk. But like always, in reality, the supreme beings do not need to be taught how to communicate. It's why they gave us all these separate languages and demonic religions, so we can't communicate with each other. So we can hate each other, kill each other, divide and conquer. The best research I've seen on the subject was from Mr. Dave Murphy, on a documentary of his called The Language of Creation. Dave connected an ancient dead language that he referred to as Paleo-Hebrew, the original language, the language of God, and likely the language of the ancients. And I can hear a lot of you saying, Captain, did you just say Hebrew? Are you one of them? No, Paleo-Hebrew has nothing to do with Hebrew or Jews. Hebrew doesn't even have anything to do with Jews, but watch Dave's video if you want more on that. Paleo-Hebrew is a pictorial language of images, sounds and mouth vibrations, just like what's referred to as ancient Egyptian hieroglyphs. Many other creatures in this world use a pictorial language, referred to as echolocation. Whales, dolphins, bats, lemurs, rats, birds and many more. They're not just making noises, they're transmitting and receiving images and sounds. A semantics experiment was made using dolphins, using a technique called climagraphs, which are patterns that represent dolphin language, similar to hieroglyphs. This particular experiment involved Jim McDough and a dolphin called a Maya. Jim entered the tank with a Maya and allowed it to do a clickety-click thing, recorded the feedback frequency, and through the climagraphs, this is the image that they got back. And to Maya, this image would have been in full HD with sound included. And it's why when this frequency was played to a different dolphin with a few different people in the tank, the new dolphin was able to pick Jim from the others. When it comes to humans, we are born with the ability to communicate with each other, but we are indoctrinated out of our own language to where we don't even understand our own children when they're born and start to talk to us. The way I managed to find the exact dates and events that led up to the last catastrophic reset of this world, every society living in it, their economies, the massacre of around 90% of the world's populations, and the takeover from the same parasites that still run this world today, was quite simple, to be fair. And I'd like to explain how, as this will help you understand my main discoveries later on. I've studied old world cartography for a long time. I'm in my 5th year living on the ocean in my sailing yacht. Navigation, charts and map reading is part of my daily life as a sailor. And I taught bushcraft and survival skills for a decade, including navigation, so I'd class myself as an expert on the matter. While comparing old and new world maps, I noticed a couple of main differences between them. The first was that no old world map shows ice anywhere. Never mind on the North Pole or any ice on the lands that surround our world. But by the 1900s, the 20th century, ice started appearing on world maps. Now, the narrative says there's always been ice in these areas, probably for like a trillion bajillion years, right? There's no disputing that there is ice towards the north and near the lands known as Antarctica, which is rapidly melting. Most indoctrinated historians would just say that the cartographers that created these old world maps were just primitive morons and liars with huge imaginations, right? Fortunately for me, I know better. When you've got a map, for example the Abono Monte 1587, that's over 400 years old, but its charts are so accurate that I've used them to navigate the oceans today, I know that these cartographers of the past are way more knowledgeable and intelligent than most people of today. The second difference between old and new world maps were the shapes of the landmasses, and I'll quickly show you what I mean. So we've got South America in the modern day, and we've got South America before named it in 1587. As you can see, it doesn't look quite right. It's more like this nowadays. Here's Chile and Lake Titicaca in modern times, and again here's Chile and Lake Titicaca in 1587. Both line up perfectly. But as you can spot the difference, on the 1587 map, Chile is about 1,000 miles inland, but nowadays Chile is on the coast. And as you can see, that due to Chile's position with Lake Titicaca, Chile hasn't moved location in recent times. They both line up, new and old. Now, a simple indoctrinated mind would come to the same conclusion. The old world map makers are morons. I had a more realistic hypothesis. Between 1587 and the modern day, there has been a worldwide catastrophic event of destruction which caused massive earthquakes, tsunamis, floods and the seas to rise. Volcanoes blowing their tops causing ash clouds that block the sun, causing a worldwide mini ice age. A mass depopulation event where the powers that be took the opportunity for a worldwide takeover and removal of our true timeline of history. And I know what you're thinking, Captain, have you been drinking seawater again? Nothing like that's happened in our recent history. A couple of years later, I needed provable answers, so I opened up a search engine and I asked a simple question. What was the average temperature of the 1700s? The average temperature during the 1700s was notably cooler, as this period was part of the Little Ice Age. The evidence and information surrounding this Little Ice Age is enormous if you ask the correct questions and code words. But for now, it just spat this temperature graph at me. Can you see it? Between the 16 and 1700s, there's a massive spike referred to as the Little Ice Age. Now, don't be fooled by their spelling, their spellcasting. There was nothing little about this Ice Age. The indoctrination tells you that these Ice Age events happen like every 10 or 20,000 years, and they last for thousands of years. But in reality, at least in recent history, these Ice Ages happen about every 400 to 700 years, and they last for about 200 to 300 years. Rinse and repeat, they're like clockwork. The Little Ice Age reached its coldest point during a 70-year period between 1645 and 1715, known as the Maronda Minimum. As you can see, between about 1630 and 1700, the sun was blocked. There's a couple of theories to how this Ice Age occurred, but there's only one which is logical in my opinion. Volcanic eruptions started happening sporadically around the Pacific from about 1611 onwards, causing volcanic dust to rise to the skies. This fallout blocked the sun, in some documented reports from Europe, for an entire year, from one of many eruptions. This, on multiple occasions documented throughout this period of time, caused a decrease of the world's temperature. 3 particularly cold intervals, one began around 1650, another about 1770, and the last in 1850, all of which were separated by intervals of slight warming. Massive magnitude earthquakes throughout this time period caused ginormous tsunamis worldwide, added with the extreme weather, high winds and torrential rainfall, added with freezing temperatures, this alone killed hundreds of millions. Now, with the mass amount of documented reports throughout this time period of volcanic activity, catastrophic 8 to 9.6 magnitude earthquakes which are the highest grade and named great earthquakes that cause catastrophic damage and loss of life over vast areas. Supposedly a rare event, but during this time period I've counted approximately 130 of these rare events. Now, going back to my hypothesis that I wrote years before asking the correct question, tsunamis don't explain worldwide permanent flooding and loss of massive areas of land. So I asked another question. What was the height of sea level in 1700? As you can see, directly related to the Little Ice Age, around 1745, sea level started rising rapidly. Now, do I believe the accuracy and honesty of this graph? No, of course not. But even if this rise of sea level was 10 times this, it wouldn't explain the huge loss of land that's been admitted worldwide. Well, admitted when you know the truth. When you take the multiple reports across the UK and Europe detailing the extreme weather, torrential rain that went on for 200 years, and in some cases reports of it not stopping raining for years on end, non-stop, catastrophic disaster after another, imagine what that would have done to the land beneath their feet, never mind what it would do to crops. But all that waterlogged, flooded land would cause not only for the sea levels to rise, but massive mudslides on land, explaining the aftermath of the mud flood that buried this world, a subject that I'll put together for you shortly. With the reported permanent loss of large areas of land like the Danish, German and Dutch losing huge amounts of their coastlines, another example on the other side of the world, in Jamaica, June the 7th, 1692, a massive 8 magnitude earthquake struck Port Royal, Jamaica, causing the town to sink into the sea, resulting in approximately 5,000 deaths due to the quake and later tsunami. 2/3 of Port Royal sank into the sea, with many buildings collapsing due to soil liquefaction. The earth opened up and swallowed many people. Most of the town's 2,000 buildings were destroyed and many ships in the harbour were capsized. Now, even when you take into account all of the documented sea level rises, torrential rain, flooding, mud floods, tsunamis, this doesn't explain all these countries reporting massive land loss and the obvious land loss between old and new world maps. Like I've shown you with Chile now being on the coast. And they even admit that this area had significant coastal loss due to the Little Ice Age. But there has to be a more logical explanation for this. Something's missing. So I asked another correct question. Something that came to me in my dreams, in images, and something that at the time I didn't even know was a real thing. Can land break off continents and slide into the ocean? Yes, land can break off from continents and slide into the ocean, a process often associated with landslides or movement of tectonic plates. However, this is typically a gradual process rather than a sudden event. Well, tell that to the Jamaicans in 1692 when their city rapidly fell into the ocean within minutes, causing all of the deaths. Continents can break apart much easier than previously suspected. Shocker, right? These findings explain the origins of flat-lying zones, hilarious, of weakness known as the detachment faults developed at depths of 10 to 15 kilometers which were not previously understood. Their conclusion: the volcanic activity during the general crisis of the 17th century played a crucial role in shaping the environmental and social landscapes of the time, contributing to widespread instability and conflict. Now, before I show you some of the absolute sickening, stomach-churning atrocities of the direct results of this Little Ice Age, researching this massacre as extensively as I did made me physically ill for a week afterwards. It was that bad. But before that, I have to explain this last part about the Little Ice Age before the AI bot shills attempt to dismiss any of the facts and truths that I'm telling you. When you go onto the cults-controlled wiki page, it'll attempt to downplay the Little Ice Age, not only by its name, but as it says. The Little Ice Age was a period of regional cooling, particularly pronounced in the North Atlantic region. It was not a true ice age of global extent. What they're saying here is that this was not a worldwide weather event and didn't cause ice to form towards the north or south. But as always, all the evidence is on the contrary. Even the indoctrinated historians refuse this narrative.
He, of course, rubbishes the Little Ice Age as episodic, minor, and, quote, largely independent regional climate changes rather than a globally synchronous increased glaciation, end quote. But if glaciers began advancing rapidly in the 14th century around the world and then retreated rapidly starting in the 19th and into the 20th century, it takes a special kind of determination to call it a regional blip. And that sort of resistance to the concept of the Little Ice Age is exactly the kind of denialism we're talking about here.
And there's dozens of scientific literature published proving that this was a worldwide weather event and did freeze our, at the time, unfrozen landmasses. Erica J. Hardy's study in the South Pacific with a 420-year history of isotope ratios, measured in samples taken from Australia's Great Barrier Reef. The results of Hendy's extensive study showed that salinity was higher in the mid-1500s through to the middle of the 19th, rather than in the 20th century. This proved that these southern regions' temperature was considerably lower during the time of the Little Ice Age. To have full access in the true horrors and direct consequences of the recent Ice Age, you have to type in a second and secret code name. The General Crisis of Humanity, or the General Crisis of 1700. And again, don't be fooled by its mediocre title. Now, this is not me connecting the Little Ice Age with the General Crisis of Humanity. This is a narrative connecting them, and this time it's not fooling you. It does not want you having this knowledge. These poor souls inherited this world from the ancients and old world civilizations just as we did, and just like your children's children will inherit what's left once our reset is complete. Impact of the Little Ice Age. The Little Ice Age not only caused agricultural failures, but also contributed to a broader social transformation. The stresses of climate change accelerated shifts towards more modern economic systems as traditional feudal structures began to break down under the pressures of the crisis. The general crisis of the 17th century included widespread famine due to failed harvests, particularly exacerbated by the Little Ice Age, which caused severe weather conditions and agricultural shortfalls. This led to significant population declines and social upheaval across various regions, including China and Europe. Unusual cold and lack of rainfall in the summer seasons. Wars and revolutions disrupted over agricultural production. Heavy taxation, difficult to sustain their livelihoods. Many regions experienced significant population losses due to starvation, disease, malnutrition-related illnesses, including the Black Death, which the conditions of the Ice Age only fueled. Food shortages led to revolts and increased crime as desperate populations sought resources. In Paris, France, during the civil strife of 1648 to 1653, there was a succession of 7 years of very heavy rainfall. The population loss there was 1/3 during the summer of 1649. Villages in Paris lost 1/4 of their inhabitants. Nobody could cope with such misery. That's 1/3 of the population of cities like Paris dead after 1 year of famine. Another famine in France between 1693 and 1694 killed 10% of France's entire population. France alone had 111 major famines over a 200-year period during the Little Ice Age. During famines across the UK and Europe, cannibalism was reported as desperate measures for survival, and I've read accounts of this happening worldwide until the late 1800s. Survival cannibalism was not only legalised, but pushed towards it when faced with starvation. Where do you think the phrase eating one's own children comes from? In one account that I read, a dismembered body of a 3-year-old girl was seen. Some parts were boiling in a pot on the fire, while others had apparently been consumed. The girl's mother assured that the child had died of natural reasons. Turn to cannibalism, eating corpses, deliberately killing others, most often children, for consumption. 2 factors put children specifically at risk. They could be more easily snatched and killed than adults, and their flesh was often considered more palatable. People resorted to eating their own children due to starvation. Across Europe, records show that 1 in 4 children died before their first birthday, and half of them didn't even reach the age of 20. I've read stories of mothers taking their children out into frozen forests and leaving them to freeze to death because they couldn't feed them. Malnutrition prevented them from producing milk. Stories of men riding their horses in such freezing conditions that the horse's skin freezes and they're able to slice flesh off the horse's back and eat it while the horse, being so numb, doesn't even feel it, and the wound would freeze within seconds. During this period and other previous resets, the cult loved their paintings, often referred to as the Massacre of Innocents. Paintings worldwide of true events where children are being brutally murdered for consumption. This particular painting was created by a piece of shit called Pierre Bugel, named the Massacre of Innocents. This oil painting was later painted over, but originally it pictured children being dragged from their mother's arms and being murdered upon orders of the king and church. A mother weeping over a dead child, begging for mercy, kicking in people's doors, snatching children, stabbing children, stabbing them with spears. Personally, I think paintings like this should be burnt, but this particular painting is on the dining room wall of Windsor Castle, the home of the King of the United Kingdom. Absolutely disgraceful. Catastrophic population losses worldwide. Food shortages affected both human populations and livestock, resulting in a high mortality rate amongst animals due to the lack of feed and resources. Increased prices for remaining livestock caused social unrest, and this explains why the pre-reset people's timeline were building huge greenhouses. They were protecting their crops from the elements of the Little Ice Age. There's too many events like wars, civil wars, massacres and other horrors that's directly related to the Little Ice Age and the general crisis of humanity to even mention, but here's a list of a few that I personally researched. The general crisis contributed to the conditions that ignited the American Revolution in 1775, but due to the conditioning, most Americans today still believe it was over the English adding a tax on tea. This era was marked by various massacres, civil wars and disputes, with an enormous loss of life. In 1709 alone, Paris, France had temperatures dropping to -15 for extended periods. The extreme cold led to famine and hypothermia and caused an estimated 600,000 deaths by the end of 1710. Sea ice surrounded Iceland, trapping its population. Then its volcano Laki blew its top, killing over half its population in a single day. Finland's winter of 1696 to 97 killed 40% of its population in 1 year's famine. Estonia, the same winter, 1696 to 97, killed 50% of its population. Rivers across the world, like the Thames in London, would freeze over with a foot deep of ice and house the Thames Frost Fairs from 1607 to 1814. Now, before I go through the world's death rates during the Little Ice Age and the general crisis of humanity, I want to show you how the AI hides all of this from you, how sneaky it is. I'm going to type into a search engine, the fall of the Ming Dynasty, but you can ask about anything related to the Little Ice Age and you'll find the same deception. I specifically asked about its fall, and as you can read down every link, scrolling for hours and hours, you won't find any mention of the Little Ice Age or the general crisis of humanity, because they don't want you connecting the truth of our past. But let's type in another question. We won't use the word fall, as in the fall of the Ming Dynasty. We'll just type in Ming Dynasty. But this time we'll include the code name, the Little Ice Age. The Little Ice Age significantly impacted the Ming Dynasty and contributed to the dynasty's decline and eventual fall in 1644. The same time period that Tartaria was wiped out and removed from history. Something I'll put together for you later. Now, the AI does this because it knows that you know the truth already, so it gives you the second narrative. We've got what I call the mainstream narrative, the usual dog shit taught in schools, the cults indoctrination camps. Then we've got the narrative, what they'll admit to when you already know the truth. Then of course we've got the actual truth, the deep dive that uncovers the true horrors of reality. Another quick example. Ask for the population of China in 1600 and it states a massive population incline. Add the Little Ice Age to the question and it states that there was a massive population decline during exactly the same period. Asking the same question, same search engine, within a minute of each other, and it gives two opposite answers. By 1850, China had lost 95% of its population, but the mainstream would tell you that they went from 150 million to 400 million during the Little Ice Age and general crisis of humanity. This dumbass AI can't fool me. AI is no match compared to an enlightened human brain and heart. On to each country's death rates. No search engine will give you approximate numbers or percentages, but they will tell you, for example, the Ming Dynasty at the time collapsed, causing the deaths of all of their 300 million inhabitants. Being the majority of China at the time, and including all the other accounts of major famines, civil wars and catastrophic destruction of the area and loss of life throughout this period, I can take all of this information that I've consumed on this subject and state a fairly accurate estimate on most countries' population declines that had good record keeping at the time. The Ming Dynasty, 100% dead, 300 million. That's the current population of America. The country called California, 100% dead, approximately 10 million. And I'll get onto California later, but this is not California of today. No different to Tartaria, a country and its people destroyed during the Little Ice Age and removed from history. A landmass 4 times the size of Europe. Only difference, California was completely destroyed and sunk to the depths of the Pacific. The Norse clans on Greenland, 100% dead, approximately 10 million. Iceland, 100% dead, 200,000. Rapa Nui, aka Easter Island, 100% dead. France, 99% dead. And as odd as that may sound, I have good reason, and once you start researching this reset yourselves, you'll know what I mean. It's almost impossible that the French survived this. The early first wave of American settlers, 95% dead. What's now referred to as American Indians, 95% dead, approximately 100 million. And it wasn't because of smallpox, unless smallpox is a code name for genocide. Tartaria, 80% dead, approximately 300 million. Again, I'll get onto the Tartarians later. Finland, 95% dead. Estonia, 95% dead. Ireland, 90% dead. Germany, 80% dead. Spain, 70% dead. England, 70% dead. The Dutch had its supposed golden age between the late 1500s and 1700s, but they were still on their knees like the rest of the world, with a 50% population decline by 1800. The only country that actually had a population increase, and I actually mean that only one, guess which? And no, it's not India, even though our brothers and sisters over there are at it like rabbits. It's actually Scotland. My family is Scots, both sides. My mum's from Stranraer and my dad's from Glasgow. Norse and Scottish genetics suits my soul well. Us Scots have got grit. Every nation is turned upside down, leading some great minds to suspect that we are approaching the end of the world. Kinda sounds like nowadays, right? This lot thought Jesus was coming to save them too. Like I said, rinse and repeat. Now bear in mind, the mainstream narrative claims that nearly every masterpiece structure around us was built around 1800. All while the world's population was down to 10% and people were still eating their own children to keep themselves alive for a couple more weeks before they starved to death themselves. Not bad, right? But dig a little deeper and we don't see the mass building of masterpieces worldwide. We find empty dead cities worldwide. Inferno after inferno as they burn the remnants of the perished and the massacred populations. It's easier to burn these places to the ground than it is to clear them by hand. Great fires in almost every city worldwide during the same time frame. Entire massive built-out cities ablaze, with narratives like someone dropped a candle or burnt some bread that caused an entire city to burn. Most of the time, no or little reported deaths. There's no one that could have burned to death. They were dead already. Fire cleared and cleaned the land for our timeline's period, but it's evident that this was more than fire. These areas look more like war zones, protecting certain areas and structures that were selected to keep. I'd say it was more like something they dropped on Hiroshima or Nagasaki in 1945. Before I go on to the next subject, this previous reset that I've just shown you wasn't the only reset that I found. I found all of them. Now, I'm not going to go into the others as they're irrelevant to the bigger picture and what I truly want to show you. Plus, in my opinion, our future is more important right now than our possible ancestors' past. You can identify all previous resets by following science on climate, isotope ratios, that kind of thing. They always coincide with catastrophic events and reported massacres and mass death events throughout history records. The truth is always hidden in plain sight. You've just got to piece it together. As the world emerged out of its ice age in the mid to late 19th century, the survivors were met with the remnants of the old world and the new world that they inherited. Disaster had reshapen and decimated the landscape around them and buried it deep in hardened mud, debris and the remains of the masses that had perished. These survivors were fully aware of the events that had passed. Stories were passed down and even put into early films of the times, like the 1944's Meet Me at St. Louis, set during the 1904 World's Fair.
Sugar. You spoil your dinner.
Papa, we saw the Galapagos flood. Big waves came up and flooded the whole city. And when the water went back, it was all muddy and horrible, full of dead bodies.
Oh.
As hard as the court have tried to completely remove these undeniable events of our recent past, the evidence speaks for itself. I've purposely taken photos from all over the world, from China, Russia, the UK, all over Europe, India, Africa, Egypt, America, Australia, and many other locations across this realm. This was worldwide and caused by the direct results of the Little Ice Age, and digging out all of this dirt must have been back-breaking work for that generation. I like this photo, it speaks 1,000 words. These two geezers over here. This bloke on the left, he's got charisma. This guy loves his job, he's a professional digger, a happy man in his work. Where this guy, you can just tell he just hates his job, slumped over, probably wanted to be like a ballet dancer or something, not a happy man. But luckily for him, trains were invented. They just had to locate and dig up all the buried train tracks, as places like America already had an entire rail network pre-reset. Clear all the bridges, build all the bridges, tunnel through entire mountains, and find themselves a few working trains. Now trains have been invented, again, they could start loading all that dirt at a lot faster speed. And over the years, our early timelines people started reverse engineering the pre-reset timelines tech, like steam engines and airships. Most mistake this type of technology as ancient or old world tech. This technology was created by our pre-reset timelines people between 1250 and 1650. It had nothing to do with the peoples that built structures like these, and I'll undeniably prove this later on. The connection between the Little Ice Age, weather events and mud floods. The Little Ice Age was characterised by prolonged periods of heavy rainfall which saturated the ground. This saturation made it more likely for mud floods to occur, especially in areas with steep terrain or loose soil, that could inundate nearby structures. Historical accounts from the Little Ice Age documented instances of flooding and mudslides that affected communities. These records often described the destruction of homes and public buildings, indicating that many structures were lost or severely damaged during this period. These are old world houses. As you can see, mud flooded. As always, when the land around these structures was excavated, the original ground floor level was unearthed. And as you can see, This wasn't the structure's basement, the cellar. This original ground floor level had windows and doors. Glazed windows facing dirt. Makes no sense, right? And like every old world structure, this stone looking building is just a red brick building with a geopolymer rendering to look like stone. This ancient structure, now called the Mormon Temple in Utah, North America, was supposedly dedicated in 1893, wanting us to believe that its construction was finished in 1893. But as you can see with all ancient and old world structures around the world, this building is severely mud flooded, and always has been since the start of our timeline. This structure has been excavated twice during our timeline. First in the 1970s, the dotted line shows our timeline's ground level, and the original arched doorway to the original ground level floor, and showing the full height of the mud flooded windows. This structure was buried by approximately 15 foot of mud. The majority of the mud floods happened between the time of 1600 to 1750. Supposedly, this structure wasn't constructed until 1893. So that means one of two options. This building was mud flooded 200 to 300 years before it was constructed, or this building was here pre-mud flood. In reality, this structure isn't 132 years old. This is an ancient building and is at least 2,000 years old. During this next period of time, all we get are empty cities, built out, immaculate, but clearly old structures and infrastructure all over the world, including countries like America, Canada and Australia. During the timeline where the narrative says all of these mud-flooded buildings were being built, all we ever find of their supposed construction are photos of primitive wooden scaffolds surrounding palaces that shouldn't exist, being painted by teams of painters. I've even managed to find out what it says on this painter's hat. Then all of a sudden, boom, filled out cities. After the direct results of the Little Ice Age, the following crisis of humanity and the decimation of the world's population, where did all these people come from? Now, the narrative will say it was just down to the immigration and migration of the British and Europeans. And I'm not saying there wasn't immigration going on at the time, but due to the fate of them early settlers and the harsh climate during the recent Ice Age, Westerners were very apprehensive about immigration to these new worlds. No matter how many offers and incentives to move there, like all the posters and pamphlets distributed at the time, offering millions of pre-built old world houses, given away for free, and offers of millions of cheap square miles of land that they wouldn't have to pay for up front, free transport across the Atlantic, and set-up grants to get living the American dream. We'll dig a wee bit deeper and we get a different repopulation story. While hidden in plain sight, the second narrative will admit a more sinister recent past. Over 540,000 children were distributed to and across America alone, in the community more commonly known as the orphan trains. Now, were these poor children orphaned by the horrors of the previous reset, or was there a more sinister explanation to this? The next part is more of a question on my behalf. The incubator babies. Were these really incubators as we know and use them today? Or was this a period of time between 1860 and 1920 where they were creating humans, genetically modified organisms? And is this where we get all of our soulless non-player characters that surround us? This despicable Jew's name is Martin Arthur Kearney, an apprentice obstetrician who worked under the obstetrician another despicable Jew called Pierre Constant Burdin. After the main repopulation of the world, Kearney, known as the Incubator Doctor, travelled the world's fairs across the world with his freak show circus type attraction of incubator babies boasting real, live human babies on display. This received worldwide attention and press coverage. Now, where was this parasite getting its constant supply of live babies from? My mum loves me with every fibre of her soul, and I was born weighing 10 pounds and looked like a potato. She couldn't even have a cup of tea without me drinking it. So what mother would give over their new or premature baby to a sack of shit like this during a time frame when every country's population had been severely reduced and begging for people to populate them cities? Were these mothers selling their unwanted babies, or were these babies motherless and being created unnaturally? Another topic on this subject, known as the asylums, hundreds if not thousands of these old world buildings were dedicated to being so-called asylums, running between the 17 and the 1800s. The narrative may say that these were lunatic asylums, but do you actually think the hardy, tough survivors of this time, after everything they've been through during the past reset, would care enough about people with mental disorders and supposedly build thousands of stone palaces to help the supposed mentally ill? Bear in mind, these aren't the snowflakes that surround us today. These survivors had grit. The narrative will tell us that these lunatic asylums were more about containing the patients like prisoners rather than treating them. That these prisoners were abused, tortured and raped. So why supposedly build, more like dedicate, these massive amazing palaces to just use them as a prison and abuse the inmates? It makes no sense, right? These were clearly not lunatic asylums, nor were they built in their AI-faked history timeline. All of these structures are wood-flooded. Every single supposed asylum that I've looked at. These asylums were either a temporary housing for people immigrating to places like America, possibly housing for children coming in, or even possibly breeding facilities. Of the most bizarre and disturbing topics of this repopulation subject are the mass amounts of symbolic posters and postcards implicating growing and selling babies during the 1890s and 1920s. These are not cute vintage art. France has hundreds of great examples of these, but as you can see, they were posted all over the world, including America. You'll see the word à vendre, and this means for sale. As this one says on the back, dated 1907, sent to the US. Dear L, don't you think they are very pretty on the other side? If so, hurry up and order one before they get sold. Love from Aggie. This one actually has the children's names written on the individual toddlers. And if we look on the back, the same handwriting. It doesn't sound like a joke, does it? Children were being sold worldwide. And you might think, why would you advertise them like this? Would you rather choose your GMO baby by this picture or something more realistic? A part of our recent history that the mainstream narrative doesn't want you knowing about, as the chances are you may be a descendant of one of these GMO non-player characters.
In the 1900s, my dad was an incubator baby in Coney Island. He was on display. They had just invented the incubator. He was.
You could literally tell me anything, I'd believe.
No, it's true.
Yeah.
Ask yourself, what was your great-grandparents' names? Or their parents' names? Probably blank, right? These now called catacombs are under every ancient and old world cathedral and church worldwide. More well known in Paris, but the size of France's catacombs only validates the mass death there. All bones dated during the Little Ice Age. Coincidence, right? After the past reset, these remains were lined in old world tunnels originally built to feed the city's water supplies. Presented in a symbolic, demonic, disrespectful manner, most known catacombs, only small sections are permitted to the public, but they admit to them having hundreds of miles that are restricted. People actually pay to see the bones of the massacred ones. Rows of dead children, and they find this fascinating. Something I can only explain as trophies of the cult. And it won't be a coincidence that they're under every old world power station, nor why they surround these so-called churches with graves of rotting bodies of the dead. Graves that only date after the last reset. That's all I've got to say on this disgraceful subject. Because the cult's AI knows what I am and knows that I know the truth, it will communicate to me differently to how it would with most. When I ask, why did the cult do this to the people? Why does it reset them? Why does it lie to them? This is my answer. When empires, nations or rulers win a war or overthrow a system, they also rewrite the narrative to justify their power. If people knew all the ways they'd been exploited, they'd resist. Suppressing certain truths maintains control over populations. Education systems are designed for compliance, not exploration. Kids are taught clean versions of events instead of the messy reality. Truth threatens power. A population that knows its real history is harder to control. A society that remembers lost knowledge doesn't need rulers. A people who understand how often we've been reset would question everything. Whole empires, lost technology and cultural worldviews don't fit neatly into textbooks. A cult literally means hidden. Ruling classes often kept deeper knowledge for themselves. Religion and politics, both the same thing, censored anything that threatens their authority, labelling it hearsay, superstition or conspiracy. Governments and media shape collective memory through propaganda, film, school and even monuments. By controlling what we remember, they influence how we behave. I think that answers my questions pretty well. Humanity did, could and would live in harmony and abundance without being governed. We wouldn't need to break the law, common law, natural law, the law of the land, that you won't bring harm or loss to another human being. That's all we need. That covers all crimes. But it doesn't stop the cult pushing their 70,000 statute legislations upon us, put in place to control and collect revenue from us to feed their own greed, destruction, genocides and even funding our own current Great Reset. A statute rule has the force of law upon consent of the governed. They poison our skies and air while blocking the sun and even blatantly admitting it, hurtling us into the next little ice age. And I've already shown you what happens after that. They poison our water supply. They poison our food. They poison our healthcare. Their AI orchestrates worldwide fake pandemics. And the docile, obedient non-player characters did as they were programmed to, attempted to police us, muffled voices through their face masks, while losing their tiny little minds and queuing up like cattle to the slaughterhouse. Not that they haven't pulled this scamdemic before. There's absolutely nothing new under the sun. Just tests to gather data on the next course of action needed and to fit all their infrastructure. All areas and subjects of the truth movement have been infiltrated by shill deceivers and what I call non-player character truthers. Non-player characters playing conspiracy theorist, pushing 5% truth with 95% fantasy bullshit, misinformation, fear and deception. And then we've got the fully AI controlled truth content creators, spouting the same shite as the non-player character truthers. It's the same issue with genuine truth journalists. It's their beliefs that hold them back, as designed to, from ever uncovering 100% truth on the particular subject that they report on year out. Stagnating on one piece of the puzzle and making no effort to discover the bigger picture. Or spouting beliefs about their imaginary ice wall that traps them in the flock in their own minds. Something I will soon undeniably prove does not exist. Where do you think the ice wall and flat earth model come from? One of the biggest deceptions that this cult brainwashes even supposed truthers with is their religions. By following a strong spiritual path of enlightenment and having a true understanding of what you are, only expands your mind, body, ability and raises our frequency. We don't need their religions that close your mind and traps you in fear. put in place to control, divide, and cause you to hate each other, to kill each other, to make you vibrate at your low levels. When it comes to this Satan's little season that most so-called truthers are rambling on about, the cult has made the masses believe and worship a fake god that was created through rape. And I'm pretty sure it's one of the 10 Commandments and a sin to fuck another man's wife. The backbone of the Christian cult is the 10 Commandments, something all Christians seem to bypass. For example, thou shalt have no other gods before me, your God, and thou shalt have no other saviours but me, your God. But Jesus is your God and your saviour, created through rape, right? And his dad, the psychopathic God that massacred this world by flooding it, killing every man, woman and innocent child. The cult have fooled all religions into worshipping evil, to make sinners of you all. Maybe this is why the cult reset and massacre the population so often, collecting the souls of their flock. The timeline before the last reset believed that Jesus was coming to save them too. He never turned up. If the people are that gullible and unenlightened that they can't see this clear deception, then maybe it is for the best that they sell their souls to Jesus for so-called salvation. I believe in nothing unless I can prove it. That's why they're your beliefs, because you can't. If something is true, you can prove it. We in this world were created, but not by the cults made up false gods written by their dogshit AI. I want to make clear from the start that I have no intention on sailing to the lands recently referred to as Antarctica. But understanding the truth of Antarctica is vital to the understanding of the bigger picture. And this is not it. The flat earth model. Our supposed known world in the middle, a ring of ice referred to as the Antarctic ice wall that wraps around our world and imprisons your minds. The first atlas globe type maps showing ice or an ice wall pops up around 1892 with the likes of the famous and heavily pushed Gleason's map. We now know that all the ice formed that we see rapidly melting today was caused by the Little Ice Age between 1600s and 1850. And later on I'll prove that nowadays Antarctica is the only remaining landmass that still remains partially frozen. The narrative of Antarctica obviously has deceptions, but in reality it's fairly close to its narrative in comparison to the purposely deceitful flat earth model. Soon after the end of the Little Ice Age, Freemason Admiral Byrd's expeditions were sent out to inspect the damage and find out what was left. A few years later, in 1961, the Antarctic Treaty was formed. The only agreement and treaty signed by all high-power nations and never broken. Now, most that have proclaimed that this treaty prevents the public from passing south of the 60 degrees south have been criticised. Now, don't get me wrong, restricting us beyond the 60th south is exactly what the treaty does. But number 2 of their rule states there will be complete freedom of scientific investigations. Now, by all means, apply for permission from your governors, begging to explore Antarctica to scientifically prove that their own bullshit narrative is alive. And if you're granted permission, I will fully fund the expedition and take you there myself. But you will be ignored, investigated or denied. And don't think you can lie your way to permission. As it says in number 7, all Antarctic stations and all ships and aircraft supplying Antarctica shall be open to inspectors from any treaty nation. But they do add number 6. The treaty applies to all land and ice shelves south of 60 degrees south, but not the seas. Which quickly takes us to their fake Antarctic trips, holidays and vacations. We've got South America. Down at the bottom we've got Cape Horn and Drake Passage, an area of ocean 600 miles wide. This thin passage added with Cape Horn where the Atlantic and the Pacific Oceans clash, known amongst us sailors as the most treacherous area in the world, the worst area one would want to sail through, a true test of a sailor's skill and grit. a place that's claimed tens of thousands of lives. So when it comes to trips to Antarctica, this would be the worst area to make the crossing by vessel. Keep that in mind. The narrative and deceptive tour guides claim there's 8 different ways to explore Antarctica, and you can book tickets for a couple of them for about £10,000 to £30,000 per person, sometimes just for a 2-day trip. Number 1, the classic Western Peninsula voyage. Crossing the Drake's Passage by vessel, even jokes about the unpredictable seas of death, stopping at the Shetland Islands, King George Islands and Half Moon Islands, none of which are Antarctica, but the flooded Caledonia of Deception Islands. You just can't make this shit up, and we'll get back onto that later. Number 2, cross the Antarctic Circle. This one sounds more promising, right? Only a handful of souls have been further than 66 degrees south. Maybe they'll let you be the 6th, right? Crossing the Drake by vessel again. Most Antarctic cruisers don't actually cross the Antarctic Circle. Shocking, right? A couple of days on a boat around the Western Peninsula, looking from the vessel, of course. Potentially crossing the Antarctic Circle line, meaning you've not crossed it and you won't be. Number 3, Antarctica, South Georgia and the Falkland Islands. Crossing the Drake again. Neither the Falkland Islands or South Georgia Islands are Antarctica. Number 4, the Ross Sea from New Zealand. Only a handful of ships per year head south from New Zealand, so good luck trying to book this fake Antarctic trip. But even if you did, the pristine Snare Islands, the Macquarie Islands, the Campbell Islands and the Auckland Islands are not Antarctica. Number 5, the Weddell Sea and the Eastern Peninsula. Crossing the Drake Passage again. Paulet Island on the tip of the peninsula is not Antarctica. Number 6, fly to Antarctica and onto the pole. A 5-hour flight to what they call the geographic South Pole, what a joke, but they get 3 to 4 hours here. In reality, you're flown to near the peninsula and shown a cheap barbershop pole for a selfie opportunity. Don't bother taking your compass because it won't indicate you're anywhere near the South Pole because you're not. Number 7, the semi-circumnavigation. A vessel from New Zealand across the Drake Passage. Peter First Island, sailing round the Mundan Sea, Ross Sea or Ross Island is not Antarctica. Plus, the Ross Ice Shelf is where all the sheer ice wall photos come from. But in reality, it's just this little bit. Number 8, hilarious, fly over the Drake. Just a plane trip, no landing, enough said. Now, it's time to show you what your world used to look like. Some of you may have seen this before. This is the Abono Monte chart from 1587. One of the largest old world maps at 10 foot by 10 foot. A truly outstanding and accurate chart, but I have no intention using this 400-year-old chart to navigate to the lands that have been hidden from us. Remember earlier, the way I found the past Great Reset, the Little Ice Age and the crisis of humanity was because of this very map. It's no coincidence that it's the least documented old world map amongst supposed truthers. They don't want you looking at this map as you may discover the hundreds of truths and hidden knowledge that I have. But even the cool has to follow the rules of this world. The truth must be there to find, hidden in plain sight. But they do love to turn your world upside down, in every way, even literally. Due to pesky cartographers and historians that retain a soul and minds to think, proving that the currently used Mercator map is completely distorted and inaccurate compared to the slightly more but still deceptive Gauss-Peter projection map, the cult have been forced to roll out their damage control and, as always, slowly adapt a new deceptive narrative. But trying to wrap our world around a globe distorts both of these deceptive maps. There's many good presentations and papers written on this subject. The main part overlooked concerning the Gauss-Peters projection map is that it's meant to be this way up, a reality that I'll explain later on. All genuine maps, new and old, are navigational aids for land, sea and air. Any charts I show are predominantly charts for sea navigation. All real maps include the key to navigate safely the very map itself. If a map does not include this, it's just a pretty picture or fantasy art like this pile of shit that all the non-player character truthers shill out. In modern marine navigation, we use multiple types of technology to travel accurately and as safely as possible. Very few modern civilian sailors can read paper charts and plot a heading. Like with most these days, technology strips their human skills that their ancestors thrived on, making lazy, incompetent and easy to dispose of sheeple. Even though I have chart plotters and other tech aboard like radar, I understand that technology is a lot of the time unreliable. But the captain's old school. A simple compass or a clear view of the sun or stars is all I need to navigate this world around us. Added with new and old charts, more reliable tech like my autopilot, radar, plus knowing all the sea shanties, I'm in my element. I've translated Monty's 1587 map in its entirety from ancient Italian to English. Now, do I believe that Monty pictured the exterior lands and their coastlines in perfect detail? No. Not only have these lands been decimated during the Little Ice Age, but you'll see these lands were relatively unknown in Monty's timeline, the people pre-reset to us. This was the edge of the known world in this time frame. The most important job of any marine chart is to inform how to travel from land to land. Routes, ports, tides, dangers along the path, that kind of thing. North is to our world centre in all directions. South is pointing outwards in all directions parallel to north. Right, when facing north, is east. And left, when facing north, is west. For example, to travel to Galicia, one of the exterior landmasses, I'd go to the middle of Galicia, and pictured by Monty, and point direct north. Leads me to what's now called South Mexico, around these ports. On this site, it shows me what landmasses were called as far back as 1550, depending on the date that you enter down here. As you can see, modern day Mexico. Change the date to Monty's time of 1587, there were 3 kingdoms, one being New Galicia. The only slight spelling difference due to the Monty being in ancient Italian and the other being in English. You would head south from mainland New Galicia to travel to Galicia, the continent, from any of the many ports that Monty pictured along New Galicia. By 1787, the Americas had been claimed, but New Galicia still remained. Plus, Rupert got his little bit as well. Between 1882 and 83, New Galicia was renamed Jalisco, and its history hidden and rewritten. But there's still loads of ancient and old world buildings still remaining in this area. Now, I can do this all the way around this map, and it lines up perfectly with the new one too. I want to give you a quick walk around on the inner lands as well as the outer, as this map's a key to understanding the bigger picture and answers hundreds of questions. We'll start in the middle. Other than the new chart that I'll be using to navigate out of here, like all maps, they're presented upside down. So let's turn this G the correct way round. The North Pole, the Arctic, Hyperborea, Rupus nigra, Samiru, the Garden of Eden. It's been called a lot of names over the years. My human ancestors called it Asgard. This G in the middle at 90 degrees, in cartography, this G basically means the destination. And even though we can't see what's under the destination marker, it's always the same in old world cartography. The Magnetic Mountain, Mount Meru, Black Rock, Mount Sinai, the Holy Mountain. Again, this mountain's got many names. And the reason why it looks so familiar, the cult have pushed this imagery on you all of your life, hidden in plain sight. The power source of us and this world. 4 islands separated by 4 rivers, one always charted having 7 heads. The original Euphrates River. The mountain described like a heart, drawing the oceans in and pushing it back out, causing the tides and the world's oceans currents, feeding a balance of warm water around our world's oceans. Like any plasma source, each side of Hyperborea we have the anode island and the cathode island. The cathode, the positive, life-giving, magnet pole and deep green island. The anode, the negative, life-taking, pole of the magnet Husiarka. Now, I can't actually translate what Husiarka means, maybe one of you know, but just breaking down that word, arca, magnetic, maybe there's a connection there, I'm not too sure. The anode and cathode islands have been shown in many other old world cartography, showing an understanding of this world up until our recent timeline. The ancients and old world civilizations knew all this and incorporated it into everything. Now, down onto the North Sea, towards the Atlantic, we've got Greenland and Iceland, Friesland and Hiltland, two more countries sunken during the Little Ice Age around 1783 and removed from the AI's history. We've got the UK, Scotia, Scotland, Aberdeen, and we've got Elgin, Glasgow. Over to Ireland, you can clearly see Dublin, Ingal, England, Lincolnia, Lincoln, Londra, London. Over to France, we've got Paris, somewhere I'm soon sailing with my son, St Michael's Mount, a stunning ancient island city off the coast of Normandy, Le Merville Abbey, which sits on top of the mount about 300 foot above sea level. I love gems like this that survived the Little Ice Age events. Onto the Mediterranean, we've got Spain, Italy, the Pisa Tower, possibly before the mudslides during the Little Ice Age gave it its lean, Egypt, the pyramids. Cairo is one of the largest cities pictured on the Monty map. Going over the Atlantic, remember this is 1587, so Canada only had Canadian provinces at this time, but fully built out with the ancient and old world infrastructure that we see there today. Take note of the griffin, that'll make more sense later. The translation was a little off on this one, but it basically says something along the lines of, here are griffins with 4 feet like eagles, and I'm pretty certain it says something about large crabs. But the other translations in Canada came through perfect. When these villagers were discovered, they found very large, almost giant men and women, and they escorted the convoys chained, beardless and naked, genocided and enslaved like all natives. Down the east coast of what's now North America, we've got Florida. Florida was discovered in year 1522, about Easter, the day on which it was discovered. Now, it says discovered twice. Discovered only 65 years before this map was created. So shows how little this timeline knew before they were reset themselves. And it wasn't the so-called American Indians building these cities and living here, as I'll prove shortly. Down to Mexico. At the time, Mexico was just a city, not a country, and Monty pictures this city perfectly. Before its complete destruction during the Little Ice Age, Mexico was the largest city and capital of the Aztec Empire. The Aztecs were not the primitive savages that the mainstream pushes. Towards their end, sure, they had become more savage and started sacrificing people to their weather gods, but only due to the direct results of the Little Ice Age. But at the same time, the Satanic Church were burning hundreds of thousands of women due to thinking that they were witches and using their witchcraft to create the bad weather. Sometimes the woman's entire family and children were burnt at the stake. So were these Aztecs any more stupidly despicable as the rest of the so-called civilized Christian world at the time? But once the sea ice melted, the Aztecs were given their Christian genocide and colonised immediately. Over to the west coast of America. Anyone that knows their geography knows this looks odd. This well-known and documented country called California was amongst the largest land to be lost during the catastrophic destruction of this area during the Little Ice Age. And as you can see, we've got modern-day California where it is today. And just up, we've got San Francisco as expected, with active volcanoes that blow about 20 years later. This entire area, 4 times the size of Europe, first flooded into its own continent, then snapped off into the ocean around 1630. It's where Americans get their myths that one day California will snap off and sink into the Pacific Ocean. It's not that modern California will fall into the ocean, it's that California, the country, did fall into the ocean. It's like Chinese whispers from your ancestors. And bear in mind that the mainstream narrative says that San Francisco was found in 1776 and named in 1847. But here it is, in 1587, named San Francisco 300 years before the fake mainstream narrative supposedly even named it. Just like I've been showing you, to navigate to the country of California, you would travel south from mainland California. This line indicates south. Straight south from mainland California to the port of California in the country of California. Just like from mainland New Galicia to the outer continent of Galicia. The country of California and its inhabitants perished around 1630 to 1700 when California nosedived into the Pacific. Another country and people removed from history, just like Tartaria, Friesland and Hitland. Quickly going on to South America, going back to what I was showing you earlier with the massive land loss in this area, as you can see with my rough outline of what's left today. Like I said, once you know the truth and use the correct code words, the narrative admits this land loss throughout this realm. During the Little Ice Age, which lasted from around the 16th to the 19th century, South America experienced notable environmental changes, particularly affecting its coastal regions. These changes influenced both flooding events and coastal loss. These flooding events often resulted from both heavy rainfall and rapid melting of glaciers. In particular, the Patagonian coastline and parts of northern Chile faced erosion. Estimates indicate that during the Little Ice Age, approximately 216,000 square miles were lost in South America. These areas right here. This area is now Patagonia, previously named Regione di Giganti, Land of the Giants. And to some, that may sound a wee bit silly, but this was a reality that's documented in many ships' logs from many famous and respected Navy admirals and captains during this timeline, the pre-reset timeline. These logs reported 8 to 12 foot men and women, including the voyage of the naval officer Ferdinand Magellan, an explorer that discovered the Straits of Magellan in 1520, a series of passages between Patagonia and what we now call Antarctica. He also named the Pacific Ocean. Himself and other crew wrote logs of accounts of these giants during his expedition that cost him his life, when he was killed by natives in the Philippines. We don't feel bad for this parasite, he deserved what he got. I won't be going into it in detail, but he befriended these peaceful giants, gained their trust, then captured a few of them, enslaved them, abused them, and they died on the ship. These entire areas broke off and sunk into the Pacific and Atlantic Oceans around 1630, the same time the continent of California disappeared. Around to China, the Great Wall of China, a stunning old world red brick structure. They have a few bits restored for the tourists, but most of this was destroyed during the recent ice age. But there's no big mystery. This has nothing to do with defence, just an old trade route to get through the mountains and over the rivers between the Chinese Ming Dynasty and Tartaria. Even more amazing than Mexico City, this is a giant island city called Quimincia, the biggest star fort I've ever seen. with 5 other island star forts around it. Probably thinking fantasy, right? No. Known as the City of Heaven, being the most splendid city in the world. Notice the 3 bridges? I told you, Monty's the man. This map was amazingly accurate for 1587. As you can see, a huge star fort. Unfortunately, this city, everything around it, including its inhabitants, were wiped out during the direct results of the Little Ice Age. Now, people really need to stop calling everything old Tartarian. When you know the truth, you'll see how ridiculous it is. It's the cult shilling their misinformation and confusion. The cult have gone on shilling overdrive to make most of you think that the Tartarians made everything old world. They've made you believe the least likely race of people and country to have made everything are in fact the very people that did. Tartaria was obliterated around the same time as the fall of the Ming Dynasty, around 1644. We can only assume Tartaria fell in the same way. This area is Tartaria, now called Russia. The lower region has sparse small cities and pictured. The above northern regions were individual teepee villages of Tartarian tribes. Nomads moving with the seasons, hence the teepee tents and wagons. As we can read in these inscriptions, all these Tartars, savage and without fixed habitations, but they carry their pavilions with them, and they carry with them leather covers which they use instead of houses. Now take note of these white animals pulling their wagons. These animals. These are not wild animals. They're pictured with blue collars. They're working animals. And when you bear in mind that animals like horses didn't arrive in mass in Asia and America until around 1750 with the British and European settlers. This description says Canny Alani, which means Great Dane dogs. There is still a dog breed around today called the Great Dane. Due to crossbreeding, modern Danes grow smaller than the Tartarian original breed, but still, look at the size of these beasts. Now, you can see how they had these Great Danes pulling their wagons. We've got Maria Tartaro, the Tartarian Ocean. Azriet, these are the 10 tribes of Israel. A manticore. Here there are animals with human faces, body of lions and tails of serpents. I'm guessing this is a womanticore, or this guy's just got bitch tits. When Monty in pictures or talks about these creatures, it's because they're real. When he shows a unicorn, he means a unicorn. When he shows a cyclops, he means a cyclops. When he shows birds flying with elephants, it's because he's seen a bird flying with an elephant. And this bird was called Rock. Going from what we know is Tartaria onto what is now called Alaska. Remember, when the country of California took a nosedive into the Pacific Ocean, it took half of what's now Alaska with it. This area in 1587 were called the Ananian Province and the Quiveria Province. Notice another griffin, like in Canada and Tartaria, a real creature of course, and the crest of both Tartaria and China, including the Ming Dynasty. Here it says, in what's modern day Alaska, this tribe who are in the countryside of Anilio in Tartari. This land is a region of Tartaria. Like countries of today, some claim rights to lands that are not attached to their own. Also take note of the same Tartarian teepee villages, tribes and the same Great Dane dogs. Small built-out cities in the lower southern regions, just like in Tartaria, and the multiple ports in the western regions of what's now Alaska, crossing over to the Ming Dynasty's City of Heaven. After the fall of the Ming Dynasty and Tartaria, the surviving Tartarians had to migrate south into Canada and what will become North America. For an unknown reason, the cult removed Tartaria and the Tartarians from their history books and renamed them the Native American Indians. The Tartarians are not native to these lands. The Tartarians are not American. They were on this land before America was claimed and named. And the Tartarians are not Indians. These are Indians, from India. The Tartarians are of Oriental descent, but their own unique species of human. While they kept their ancient native traditions of living naturally in teepee villages, wise and knowledgeable, a fresh start in a new world. With still no horses on the land, and scientific proof that the first dogs of America came from Asia and Tartaria, due to the lack of resources and major famines worldwide at this time, the old ways of the Great Danes had to adapt. The Tartarian survivors prospered on this fully built out land like you see all over Canada and America, but still chose to live how they always have. Naturally. Beautifully. Going back to the inscriptions in Tartaria, Avriet, these are the 10 tribes of Israel. Now this is not Israel, the country of today, but look who it admits are one of the tribes of Israel. The American Indians, who we now know are the Tartarians, hence why this inscription was written in Tartaria. But this list of tribe names doesn't mention the Tartarians, only by their newly AI written name, the Native American Indians. Unfortunately for the Tartarians, the sea ice melted and allowed settlers to spew in and Christianity caught with them. Over the next 100 years, the remaining adult Tartarians were genocided of up to 100 million, and the AI wrote a new history for the now Native American Indians. I think the correct term is cultural genocide, indoctrinated through forced Christian schooling. Tartaria, like many other countries like California, Friesland and Hilton, were destroyed by the Little Ice Age, the last great reset, and removed from history. The way Tartaria was rediscovered during our timeline was through old world maps. Now, most infatuate on when Tartaria was removed from maps and what must have happened to them, which I've now explained. But no one seems to ask, when did Tartaria start appearing on maps? And the answer to that is 1292. It was around this date that the country of Tartaria was formed, and that same country was destroyed around 1644. The Grand Tartaria that built everything everywhere, every building in every country, were around for 352 years, start to finish, and lived in teepees the entire time. They still do. The name Tartaria did not exist before the late 1200s. Before anyone starts rambling, it was the peoples that lived there before that built everything everywhere. My point exactly. They were not called the Tartarians, so why are most calling everything old world Tartarian? The country that inhabited this land before it was called Tartaria in 1292 was called Kievan Rus, and before that this country was called Srifia. If you still believe that Tartaria built everything everywhere, then you, my friend, have gone full retard. I'll really quickly take you around the exterior lands. South of South America, we've got the Land of Fire, the only landmass without a proper name as such, aka Antarctica. And as it says, a port for every wind. A shipping port on what's now Antarctica in 1587. And the civilization that populated this continent was called the Japanoki people. Now bear in mind that the mainstream narrative says that this continent, which a remaining part of it is now called Antarctica, was only discovered and explored in 1911. But here it is, over 300 years earlier, detailing its civilization, ports, rivers and terrain. Now there's good reason why these two landmasses were called the Land of Fire. This land bleeds red rivers. From Admiral Byrd's expeditions landing on 300 square mile patches of warm areas on Antarctica were thermally warm lakes. Like I was showing you earlier with the island of Deception, this massive island that they use as a port, very close to where Monty's port was. Thermal hot springs and red rock all over the place. These are some of the reasons why this land was referred to as the Land of Fire. South from South Mexico to Galicia. South from California to the Kesh. I'll get onto this later, but this is where the cult and some of their puppets live. South from South China to Nova Guinea, and this one will blow your mind later. And Monty detailed its inhabitants, who are amongst us. South from South India to Patalia, and again detailed by Monty as inhabited. South from West Africa to what I call Vista 3. South from South Africa to what I call Vista 2 and 1. And in Monty's timeline, this land was discovered by the Portuguese. And we'll be coming back to all of these later on the modern chart. As I briefly explained towards the start, the moon is not a solid object that Freemasons can land on. It's a focused electromagnetic plasma phenomenon. Electromagnetic energy comes from below the Earth at the magnetic north. The moon is a reversed image of our flat world's floor plan, a mirrored bird's eye view. Our never changing face of the moon. By altering the colours, the world around us starts to appear. And I'll refer to this as the political map. It will help you get your head around it a bit better. This lunar map is so accurately detailed that it's an impossibility for it to be a coincidence. I believe in nothing, and I've tried to debunk it, but I can't. It lines up perfectly with the Monty, and I know the Monty map to be accurate. And there's some of you thinking, Captain, you're contradicting yourself now. You said a map is only a real map if it retains a built-in key, a navigational guide to navigate the very map itself. And you're right. Don't take them eyeballs off your screen. Perfection. There's the key. The Monty chart is amazingly accurate for its day. The lunar chart is amazingly accurate today. Before I get stuck in, I want to thank Vibes of the Cosmos for his years of research on this subject. His work's outstanding, and with respect to Vibes and every other genuine truth journalist, unfortunately, like most researchers, they make mistakes and sometimes don't comprehend the bigger picture and allow themselves to be blindsided with beliefs pushed upon them. So like with all these subjects I've touched on during this presentation, I've corrected, connected and finished Vibes of the Cosmos' work on this particular subject. Vibes has got the locations of the exterior lands in the incorrect areas geographically, in the wrong order and even missing in his seemingly unfinished work. These mistakes were for 3 reasons. 1. Vibes doesn't understand the destruction of the recent Little Ice Age between the 1587 Monty map and modern maps and the severe amount of land lost. 2. Vibes is not an expert in cartography specialising in Old World cartography and particularly the Abono Monty 1587. 3. Vibes is not a sailor nor truly understands marine navigation, chart plotting or astronavigation. Vibes mistakenly labelled this landmass as Nova Guinea, but this is actually the Kesh. What I've outlined here was Nova Guinea's original location before the destruction of the Little Ice Age, and everything inside this line was part of Nova Guinea. And here are the rest. As you can see, this includes Australia and New Zealand, amongst other surrounding islands like Fuji. I can undeniably prove this geographically amongst dozens of other proofs, mainly with the help of Monty's map, the key. And the implications are mind-blowing. Australia is full of old world and even ancient architecture predating the recent reset and the Little Ice Age, meaning there was built up architecture and infrastructure not only in our known world but even in the outer lands that surround us. The mainstream tells us that Australia was discovered by James Cook in 1770 and named Australia around 1825. And every old world building there was founded after. And as you can see on the Monty map, Australia's massive landmass is missing in the highly detailed area that Australia should be in geographically. There's only one country missing on the entire Monty map. Guess which one? Yep, Australia. But in reality, Monty didn't miss Australia out. It's right in front of you. Well, what Australia used to look like before every volcano in the area blew their tops all at once for years on end, causing massive earthquakes, mudslides and entire countries to fall into the oceans during the Little Ice Age that only ended in 1860. Now, let me give you one of the undeniable proofs, then I'll get onto a few of the more interesting proofs out of the dozens that I've collected. There's a couple of ways that we can use Australia's position geographically today and use it to locate the same area on Monty's map. The tropical zodiac is a system that divides the sky into 12 equal parts, each corresponding to a zodiac sign. The tropical zodiac is not directly used for navigation, but understanding celestial movements is crucial for us navigators. The Tropic of Capricorn runs through South Africa, South America and Australia. This line of latitude marks the southernmost point where the sun can be directly overhead at noon during the December solstice. The Tropic of Capricorn runs through the southern part of South Africa, just like on the Monty map, and runs through the central part of South America, as on the Monty, and lastly runs through Australia's central region. As I follow the Tropic of Capricorn into the area where Australia now geographically sits, there's only this section of land that Capricorn runs through, showing the location of Australia on the Monty map. And guess what landmass we're on? Yep, Nova Guinea. Lines up perfectly, and Australia geographically sits right here. New Guinea just under the equator line, and the Indonesian islands all line up geographically to Australia's position too. Using Borneo as a reference, as its name hasn't changed since its 1587 map, and Borneo today, we've got Malaysia, Singapore, Java, which has took a serious hit since 1587, the Swahili's, New Zealand plus surrounding islands were also part of Nova Guinea. Pre-Little Ice Age and the destruction that came with it, Papua New Guinea was known as the Glio Kingdom, but we still see remnants of the old city names like Papua's, Papua New Guinea. The narrative says the Spanish were the first to name it after the reset, Nueva Guinea. Nueva Guinea, Nova Guinea. Clearly named after the country and outer ring landmass that had just been renamed Australia. The documented civilization in Nova Guinea was called the Kingdom of Brasilia. Australia, Brasilia. Sounds similar, but it gets weirder. The oceans on Monty's map behind the ring of continents were titled, behind Nova Guinea, now Australia, Oceano Austral Giatico. Altogether, it just translates to Southern Ocean, but if we take the word as it was written and said at the time, Austral, the V's in ancient Italian were pronounced as a U in modern Italian, so it's Austral, Australia. Now, is it a coincidence that the newly named Australia can be made up from the same name of its previous kingdom, Brasilia, and its ocean, Austral? Plus, when you add Nueva Guinea, Nova Guinea, New Guinea, that's the old country, its kingdom, and ocean's name hidden inside the new names. Obviously not a coincidence, as I've already proven this is Australia geographically. Discovered in 1770, my hairy Scottish arse was it. I could keep doing this with the name links, but I want to show you the people of the Kingdom of Brasilia. There's multiple descriptions of the inhabitants of Nova Guinea on Monty's map. The photos I'm showing are of the now called Australian Aboriginals, New Zealand Maoris and the New Guinean peoples. These peoples are of the same race just different tribes and separated by the destruction of the Little Ice Age. In these countries which are not yet well known, men go naked and among them. The oldest perform the office of kings, who however govern in the manner of a republic, seeing in all manner of a barbarian, without any policy in this. The inhabitants of this country do not want the trade of strangers, or their friendship, and this is forbidden by their kings under the greatest pains and a gift for idlers, meaning come ashore and we'll kill you and eat you. During any of the expeditions, if I anchor up offshore and this lot come running down the beach, or this guy pops out of his house with his dear old mum, I'm out of there. The last thing I wanted to mention before we move on is the weird unique animals and critters shown on Monty's map of Nova Guinea. Now don't get me wrong, there's unusual critters all over Monty's exterior lands, but Australia is often regarded as the land of unique wildlife and having the most extraordinary and rare species on Earth. Let's have a quick look at what happened to the survivors of the Brasilia Kingdom after the Little Ice Age and British and Europeans founded it once more, blessing its natives with their Christianity. 95% of the native Nova Guinean people were genocided, raped and enslaved during massacres that sickened me during my proof gathering for this documentary, and I won't be repeating any of it. What I found pained my body and soul. Especially this Jumanji looking piece of shit. If there's a jaw I'd like to break, it's his. I'd like to see him smirk then. Evil bastard. And where did they take them? Probably to dig out all the mud flood in North America, then dig their own graves. The most mind-blowing thing about Nova Guinea, what we now know is Australia and New Zealand, is this outer ring landmass that's meant to be part of the Great Imaginary Ice Wall had fully built out cities and infrastructure pre-reset, pre the Little Ice Age. The same infrastructure we see all over Australia today. And as this part of the ring of land around us was built out and was inhabited by its builders in the past, it's only logical to expect all of these land masses to be built out with infrastructure. I've known this for a while and it still blows my mind to think about the possibilities. Let me show you how they hide these lands from you. These are the marine traffic paths. These are the flight paths. These lands are hidden to us on their modern distorted maps, but visible on the lunar chart, Monty map plus other old world maps. As you can see, both marine and flight traffic misses these hidden lands with perfection, and gives more accurate flight plan times than their own distorted map and their flat earth fake map. Back down to Antarctica. This is what Antarctica is, this tiny little turd. A small island off South America. Like I said, close to its mainstream narrative, but the main lie is its size. It's not continent number 7, it's a small island, a remnant of the Land of Fire. That dot right there, that's the Ross Ice Shelf, also known as the Ice Wall. Scary, right? How are we going to get over it? How are we going to get around it? We must be trapped. In your minds, maybe. You've been brainwashed into believing in an ice wall with zero evidence of its existence whatsoever. When millions of people woke up to the realisation that we don't live on a globe, the cult knew that our next step was to go look for ourselves. So they conditioned everyone to believe in their ice wall that traps you in your mind like their globe used to. It's really sad to see how effective their deception was. What else are you willing to believe without any evidence whatsoever? These islands are also part of the Land of Fire, but these are hidden on the cult's modern maps. The second landmass on Monty's map was completely destroyed with no remnants left on the lunar map. Once our current and coming ice age are complete, there'll be nothing left down here. Galicia was decimated too. On the lunar map there's a faint line in between these landmasses. I wish I could give you more than my scribbles over Vibes' map, but I'm not a very technical man. If you do have the technical skills to create a similar type map like Vibes' map, but with my corrections to it, obviously I'd pay you for your services, please get in touch. So Galicia is about the same size as Canada, America and Mexico combined. Look at the size of Lakesh. The fact that they give us Australia but not this and go to the extreme lengths to hide it from us, I'm guessing this is a landmass that the cult inhabit for themselves. I've collected a dozen clues and hints that this is the case, like this photo from inside Air Force One, JFK's presidential plane. Notice the map on the wall, and no, that's not Australia, that's Lakesh. It's highlighted in lots of old world cartography. Lakesh has good weather, easy and quick to access, plus this continent didn't see much destruction during the Little Ice Age. We've already been quickly over Nova Guinea, aka Australia, New Zealand and surrounding islands, but still, look at all this land south of Australia. On to Tartaria. This was completely missing off Vibe's map locations. The creepy thing is, in 1587 this continent was inhabited by a civilization of people described in Monty's map. And bear in mind he was correct about the Nova Guinea people, so chances are he's right about the Tartaria peoples too. Less known, but this is what I've got. In these countries it's not allowed for foreigners to live there, and everyone goes naked, so we're seeing a trend, and is very white. Very white to me sounds odd, coming from white Caucasians. During my research I did find a fair few photos of New Guinean people painting themselves white, and they did this to scare off peoples and other tribes. Or maybe they were just pale skinned. On to what I call Vista 3. Remember on the Monty, all three of these continents were called Vista or Land of Vista, implying that there's some type of connection that I've never been able to connect. Maybe one of you can. But look at the size of this landmass. We could fit 3 of our world's land combined into this area. It's gigantic. And the chances are this entire area is fully built out with ancient and old world infrastructure, possibly even populated. We've got Vista 2, a series of lands twice the size of Europe. Again, I bet this land is fully built out. And the last gem, Vista 1, previously known as Atlantis. Destroyed during ancient times but not sunken like the legends state until the destruction of the Little Ice Age. Obviously Vibes also figured out that Atlantis was down here, but like most on his layout, Vibes mistakenly classed Vista 2 as Atlantis. Most that search for Atlantis are taken way off the mark with fantasy. Like in any research, stick to the facts and you'll always get to the truth. Use logic. Atlantis, Atlantean, Atlantic Ocean. Now, quickly going back to the different timelines of architecture. Now you're starting to understand the 4 different timelines. There's ways that we can prove the pre-reset timelines people did not build the stunning ancient and old world architecture. As Monty states, these outer landmasses were not yet well known. Monty's 1587 map was made towards the end of the pre-reset timeline. 20 years later, the world went to shit. So we know it wasn't the pre-reset timeline that made these structures we see all over places like Australia. The main mud floods happened between 16 and 1700. The narrative says that these Australian structures weren't built until the late 1800s, but all of them are severely mud flooded. So they either built all of these palaces, then decided to bury them all in mud, or these buildings were built pre-mud flood. So these structures are clearly built pre-reset and pre the Little Ice Age. And we know it wasn't the Nova Guinea peoples, the Brasilia Kingdom's people, that built these structures. Ancient and old world buildings all over Australia which are of the same architectural style as structures in England, France, Spain and the rest of the known world. It's an impossibility that the Nova Guinean people built their structures in exactly the same way, especially with these people having no contact with the outside world during their timeline. The Nova Guineans inherited this land and its infrastructure just as the rest of the pre-reset timeline did. Just as our timeline inherited what was left from our pre-reset timeline. These buildings were created by the ancient and old world timelines people before their own demise. Clearly the ancient and old world timelines people inhabited all lands, including the outer ring of landmasses that surround us. Monty's time, the people pre-reset to us, obviously had a higher knowledge about our world compared to our dumbed down timeline. Humanity has never been this stupid. Right, before the ice wall lovers start pointing around the lunar edge and screaming ice wall, let me show you a crappy experiment I did. This black piece of paper represents our world. Everything we see on the Monty and lunar maps. All around our known world I've placed other charts representing other landmasses beyond. I've got a round mirror. This represents our moon's reflection. It's in no way to scale, but that doesn't matter, you'll get the point. The camera represents our perspective looking up at the moon. And as I rotate the moon around our world, this is a reflection, our perspective. All we see is a round reflection of the immediate land around us, but we can't even see the full black rectangle piece of paper, only a small circle part of it. So does that prove that the rectangle is actually a circle? No, because we can step back and we know 100% that there's more than the little circle that we can see from ground level. My logical mind only gives two possibilities. This circle is the edge of the known world, a barrier, maybe even an ice wall, a sealed unit from that point onwards. Or, like I said with my experiment, when you look into your bathroom mirror, do you see the reflection of the entire wall behind you, or just a part of it? Knowing for a fact that these hidden lands exist, this creates more issues and questions. We know for a fact that our local moon and sun both circle and spiral around our north. But if this outer land, large enough to fit 3 times our world inside, doesn't get the warmth from our local sun, it must be in darkness and frozen. Now, this is just a theory until I prove it, and I eventually will because I'm right. It would be a waste to create this massive landmass, plus possibly more beyond, to only allow a tiny part of it to be livable and accessible. It just doesn't make sense to me. And whenever something doesn't make sense to me, it's always because it's wrong. My soul resonates with the truth and receives information directly from source. And I feel it in my bones that these lands are habitable. If this area wasn't receiving warmth, the land and oceans would be frozen. There wouldn't be any distinctive features between the frozen land and seas. And the moon's reflection would look more like this. But that's not what we see. We see separate land and liquid oceans, indicating warmth and light. How could the moon reflect darkness and show landmasses in such detail? The only logical explanation would be this area has its own heat and light source. The sun and moon are yin and yang. You can't have one without the other. And you can't have either without their power source, a magnetic north. My improving theory is that this land has its own sun and moon. Light, warmth, a power source and a magnetic north. Once becoming out of range of our lunar map, the next moon will come into view. Our moon and sun are not unique. I don't know how far the land goes before its inevitable containment, but at the end of the day, neither do any of you. And there's only 2 ways that we can find out. Remove the cult and gain back the secret libraries and knowledge, and or just go and look for ourselves. I need help from truth seekers and content creators to help push the information on this documentary, to put truth research back on the right path. I don't expect channels to repost it, as the truth is against YouTube's community guidelines and you'll only have your channel deleted over it. But you can give 10 seconds of your time to promote and show your followers where to find this documentary. I've posted it on 17 different social medias and made its own webpage. The key to taking your freedom and world back isn't through violence, or voting, or standing outside waving a cardboard sign. As their AI stated, the truth threatens their power. The truth will set you all free. Knowledge ascends to enlightenment and a higher vibration. In this documentary, you've seen a glimpse of the power of frequency and vibration. When the veil's lifted and the curtain's drawn, they lose the psychological power they have over the masses, and we can purge these parasites from our world for good. We are the ones with the true power. We can manifest a better world. I'm offering to take 11 brave enlightened souls for the first expedition over 2 vessels. I will show you all the reality of the world around you, and there's nothing the cult can do to stop me. I need a second captain for Saorsa 2, a 40-foot steel-hulled, cutter-rigged sailing yacht. No details of the expedition will be given until you've been selected as crew. For the first voyage, I ask for no females, no one under the age of 25, no one with children under the age of 18, and no one over the age of 60. And I mean no disrespect. I will protect my crew and we will return safely, but sailing into undetailed, uncharted and unknown waters has its dangers, and I don't need the listed above clouding my job as captain. Each crew member must be prepared to individually spend 10 days with myself aboard Saorsa, my home, to experience and learn the basics of sailing and navigation, and approximately a 7-week expedition round trip. I can't be fooled, and I can see through your windows and into your soul. So if you don't have one or have bad intentions for me or my crew, I will see you. The parasites that runs and deceives this world has no power over me, and the captain doesn't like having his time wasted by deceivers. You may be a wolf in sheep's clothing, but I'm a lion in lions. Be warned. I don't trust tech, but for now, if you'd like to contact me, please see the address on screen or in the link below if this is an original post from a channel owned by myself. Any issues in future, and I'll add a PO box address. Just be careful of deceivers. I would never ask any of you to do or give me anything. I will show you all your reality at my own expense. Anyways, if you've got to this point, thank you for your time. Peace and love to you all.